Hello and welcome to another episode of What Does It Mean to Be Human, a podcast on life, meaning, and everything. And as always, Ben Gare, myself, Ron Saylor, here to share with you, our wonderful audience, what does it mean to be human. And today we're going to continue the show with talking about the emotions in the body and the different stages that we go through. The initial stage, the mid stage, end stage, and really talking about timelines and things like that and how it seems to affect us and what we can do to kind of work with it. So I was hoping to continue with my own journey, as I shared last week, how I had a release in my neck and how that opened up old memory of getting beat up as a young kid. I was about maybe 7 or 8 by these other kids, and how that released all these old memories, which I have not had in a long time. And the kind of the fallout that had for me, even though I had a lot of awareness around what was going on, I still found myself comforting, right? Looking for nourishment, looking for some kind of nurturing. And for me, it was like looking towards food, which meant, Tim Tams, ice cream, biscuits, and going, you know what, it's okay. I need to kind of like deal with it because it was a 40-year-old memory that came up. And now I'm into my second week. And what's happened is that my lower back actually went out last Thursday. And it wasn't anything debilitating. I'm still functional, still able to work, still able to be, do stuff. But it was just a small limitation. And so I kind of went into a process around that. And what was interesting was, which I've never had this actually come up in any of the work I've done, rarely has it come up, is the situation. So I'll just give a quick backstory for those who missed last week's episode. We were playing some kind of catching game, and it was in the early 80s, and we were living in Lebanon, and we're under my dad's care. And there were these kids chasing me, and I thought they were part of the game. But when they cornered me in an alleyway, they were saying that the young one had said that I looked like the guy that had beat him up. So his older brothers were there, and there were like 4 of them, and they all beat me up. So anyway, what came up in my last session was that the lower back pain was, whatever was releasing was that, my dad was not there for me. Not that my dad wasn't there for me in my life, because my parents were separated at such a young age that, mum was the primary caretaker for most of my life. But during this period when we were living in Lebanon, we were under our dad's care. And in that session, it was like, he wasn't there to come out and protect me and save me. Like, he wasn't there to come out and fight for me and fend for me and, get these little kids away from me. He wasn't there to like hold me and say, it's okay. He wasn't there to say, I'm sorry that I wasn't there for you. And I've never had that come up, right? And it's taken me a long time just to get to this point. And it was quite interesting because I was thinking to myself, wow, I've never had this feeling. How does it make me feel? What emotions am I tapping into? Like, what other areas of my body have I stored memories which I had no clue about? And that's what I wanted to continue with today, Ben, is to share about that and to get your views on how we go through layers in the body, right? It's never always one thing, but one thing can be a trigger for another thing, right?
What age were you when this was happening?
This was about 7 or 8, mate, I think.
Right. So often, as we've spoken about here, that usually it's the first 7 years is the cycle, so it begins the pattern. So as much as you said, it wasn't to do with dad not being there for you. It's almost more continuation of him leaving when you were young, you were saying. So it is another reinforcement, another layer of what is probably even an older story before that, because as we've kind of shared, that it's our perspective that it begins the seed, and then a lot of life is just reinforcing the issue. So yeah, he wasn't there for you physically in a different kind of way than you expected, but often, as the way we think, it could be informed, in your case, knowing a little bit about your story, from an earlier, already not feeling like he's there for you. So yeah, these are how sort of um, the body holds onto the story, and we start to recreate scenarios where it's reinforced as opposed to it being a new um, understanding. But I mean, there is always layers to anything. But yeah, it sounds like another trigger point for a similar uh, experience you've been having with him anyway. Does that resonate with
Yeah, and I guess for this, it was quite a specific memory, right? As in, like, yeah, like, you know, my dad wasn't there, me growing up, so there's always sense like dad was not there, right? That's kind of that general story, dad was not there, what you were sharing about. And in this particular incident, it was like he wasn't there in that particular place, right? But it's from going from a general to a really specific, like, where are you, man? You should be here. Why aren't you saving me? What's going on, mate? Why am I doing this on my own?
Yeah.
And
yeah, and it's. I just meant that that's it. It takes it to a deeper cut because the feeling was there to some degree already, and this just took it to another place and gave it even more justification to exist. You know, and taking it to a different sort of place that you needed him physically there in that moment because it's fight and flight or whatever. But this is how our body is almost trained or gets used to the concept that, and we're a constantly manifesting machine, you know, so what we're attaching, even if it might be an event today, we're still attaching it to some kind of concept that is already instilled in us in the first place.
yeah, and you know what's really interesting is like I've processed it. It's not like I spent too much time with it, but I definitely sat with it a couple of times, maybe 3-4 times in the week. And all that was coming up for me was that, you know what, all I kept saying was, you know what, Dad, I love you, Dad. I had nothing but love. And I think that really helped me to release a lot of the tension. Because in the past, I probably would have gone through more of an anger or more of a, like, you know, I would have been cursing him or, you know, like looking to be angry with him, right? But in this instance, it was really about just letting go and just saying, you know, like it was a lot of love was there. Just having that process around that is really taking the edge off my lower back. And naturally, you know, not putting myself in awkward positions as well has helped physically, but the emotional side, we're tapping into it and just tuning in. And again, going through my own process of sitting there, putting my awareness into my breath and putting my awareness into my lower back. And it was kind of more on the left side, even though it was kind of central, more dominated to the left, where I've had issues in the past, and able to just sit with it and then just focus on natural breath and take myself through a guided meditation or just, you know, guided dialogue, like, you know, how does it feel? Like, what's the main emotion in this area? What's the main color? Are there any shapes? Are there any sounds? Are there any feelings? What are the thoughts? You know, really just kind of allowing myself to go into it from a neutral point of place as opposed to getting caught up in the emotions and subjective. I was more, again, like I talk about this witness where you step aside, step out of yourself and just watch the parade go by. And in that process, I was just able to notice small little releases in my lower back as I got deeper and just caught up into the emotion and seeing it for what it was. And there's a lot of fear, right? There's a lot of fear in there. That, yeah, I didn't have my dad didn't have my back, right? So, you know, growing up, like no one had my back. I had to like fend for myself, all this kind of fear and, you know, who's, you know, looking for a savior who's going to save me. Yeah. Right, because no one was there to save me for that, right? So that was quite an interesting experience I found, and at the end of it, there was nothing but love.
Did you have a bodywork session at that time, or you just did it internally?
I was doing it myself, but what I did do, I did have a session here at the clinic. And we were focusing just on calibrating my emotions. And in that calibration, we came up, the memory came up that, you know, it was a dad thing. But I was already processing, doing my own process before that. And then in that process, it was more fine-tuned, I guess you could say, to that area.
Yeah, so a few points I just wanted to pick up on there. You kind of spoke about like getting in tune with the color and the texture of the emotion and these where it lives specifically. I just kind of wanted to quickly touch on that just to fill in sort of the
Yeah, man.
why we do that sort of stuff. Both you and I would do that in our sessions, but it's about it's less about the color and less about the texture or the nitty-gritty details of what it is, and more about you defining it in such a way that it's palpable to you. You know, so by looking at it, and there is, it's not that the colors and stuff don't have correlation. It's just less the focal point, at least for me, the way I work. You may be the same, you may be slightly different, you may be focused on the colors a bit more. I'm not sure, but it tends to change color as your relationship to the thing changes. So there may be, again, people that are way more into the color side that could use that to identify certain kind of aspects. I personally don't. But yeah, the reason Ron brought that up is because by getting in that minute detail, you're more connecting to the memory as opposed to the details. Does that fit for you, or?
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I was speaking generally about, yeah, there are elements that we do in what we were trained in as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't get caught up too much about the color and the shape. They're kind of just, again, like you say, another ways to fine tune what's going on and to connect to the experience. So yeah, that's what's going on.
Yeah, and that's why I thought to give a bit of a context, if that sounded strange to anybody, or what does that mean, or what does that look like in practical reality? Because this is something you can do yourself. And again, sort of, we're suggesting don't get hooked up in the color or the shape or the textures or things like that. Where we're coming from when we say that, it's about getting into the definition or getting more detail and clarity of what that thing is. And often you can tell something's shifted or your relationship to something is shifted because that shape or texture or color may change. Again, it's obviously not our focal point. Some people it may be, but if that's your area of knowledge, but that's where we're coming from. So just to fill in some blanks there. And the other one I kind of wanted to bring up is that we talked about kind of radical personal responsibility and how deep we take everything. So you touched on their sort of love for your father, and that was kind of the end result. And that's ultimately the goal of most of this. I mean, because it's easy, especially when there's like obvious abuse or trauma that has been done by a perpetrator, whoever that is, whether it's within the family or extended family or a stranger. It's easy to go, well, it was done to me, you know, so it's their fault, you know. And whatever the scenario was that caused that thought system is true. And it could be the cause of a belief system that is formed from that time, or whatever the fallout from the event was. But love and forgiveness comes into the picture more when we start to get the understanding that you know, our parents and these people that hurt us are just humans too. You know, they have their own brokenness. They're passing on the wounds that they got because they were potentially used in a similar sort of way or abandoned in a similar sort of way. So often, as we just said, we're reading out sort of a lot of our things for them to be healed, where they're looking to be healed. And unless we're kind of vigilant and choosing to break these things down, we can just keep passing them on generationally. And this is what we talk about, sort of generational trauma, or it's sort of like even down to certain behaviors because your family grew up poor or something, and that would be like intergenerational long time period that your family line has been exposed to that, so that there's ways to sort of stop perpetuating that, and sort of getting to that level of love and acceptance and forgiveness that you speak about, that you have with your dad, is the most beautiful place that you could possibly get to. And that shows real integration of the journey, because it's easy to blame, it's easy to get pissed off, and it's easy to go, oh, well, that was X was done to me, whatever the scenario is. But once you start to understand that this is just another human that probably didn't have the education, that may not have done the work, that is acting from their own wounds, it starts to bring into context how that possibly could have come about. Again, I'm not justifying that it's okay. I'm not justifying that it's right. It's just that you start to change your relationship from being the victim to be the more empowered, taking responsibility for the bit that you can do. So you can only let go of any anger or judgment or expectation at that person and coming to the forgiveness stage. That's all you can, and you may want an apology, you may want some kind of healing to come about and reconnect with someone and think it's all good. That's not necessarily it. It's you coming to the place within yourself where you've let go of it and you can still feel love and witness that person even in their brokenness and go, and have compassion for their experience, because obviously it led them to a place to take the actions they did. And we're all human, you know. So this is sort of one of the biggies of radical personal responsibility, and how these things are passed on, how generational sort of trauma lives in all of us on some level. What comes up for you there, man?
Mate, what comes up for me is fuck yeah. That's what comes up, mate.
Yeah.
You know, and it's true. You know, there's like what you talk about, profound self-responsibility. You know, that you, and that's a tough one. You know, it's really a tough journey to take on, where you say, you know what, on some level, I created all this shit in my life. I did this. Did I mean to do it? Did I intentionally set out to do that? Well, probably not. No one goes to intentionally set out to make sure they have a really bad life or a miserable life or a difficult life. But on some level, we create these thoughts and these feelings and these emotions, these situations, these scenarios. I mean, I believe we're born from all time or space as natural light beings into humans, right? To have an experience as a human being. That's what I believe. And when we come into this world, we want to have a experience as an individual, as a human. And we're trying to understand that from a place of light and love into this physical body that we have, that has all these different things going on, like thoughts and feelings and emotions and all this stuff, right? As true beings of love and light, the ego doesn't really exist, mate. You're just in your heart, connected to all time and space. And in this world, it's kind of like we're trying to navigate all that, right? What does it mean? So learning to take responsibility for your life is huge. It's one of the biggest things anyone, all of us, can ever do, right? And that really sat with me, Ben, with what you're saying, because there's responsibility, right? And some of us have the view, and I know I've done this in the past, I'm responsible for myself. I'm not responsible for you or what you do. So, you know, I can take responsibility for myself. That doesn't mean I'm not going to stop judging or blaming you for what you did,
Yeah.
right?
That's not
Because on some
justifying
level,
what
you've
happened.
affected what, yeah, you've affected what's happened in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's a form of responsibility. What Ben's talking about is taking profound responsibility, where you sit back and go, you know what? I'm responsible for everything that happened. It doesn't matter what they did or what I did, but on some level, I created that. And that's a massive, massive concept to digest and sit with and say yes. And it takes time to get to that point, no doubt. And don't be in a rush to get there.
Yeah.
And you know, it does take time to sit in yourself and have forgiveness and compassion for yourself, and that will feed out into others. And look, you know what? You know, we've all had some trauma, some bad stuff happen to us in the past. I know I've had it. I could go on forever about it, right? But it's not the point. It's not the point of trying to relive it or trying to reinforce it or trying to keep it like as a defining moment for who I am in this world. It's an experience. And I use that experience to draw on to create the things that I love, because it's not me. It doesn't have to be me, right? And it doesn't, it's like you were saying, but it's not about where you need to seek resolution with that person. They owe you an apology or you need to apologize. Sometimes you do, but there's always there's a way. Yeah, like you either, it happens naturally or you set the intention. You can, it's like anything, right? Trying to force something is, you're probably, you know, the path of least resistance. You're going to try and resist or force, and the opposite's probably going to happen, right? I mean, this is a classic example. You have the intention. Like, I had a family incident over the weekend. Like, my family just drove me fucking insane. I can just say that. No, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. You know, it doesn't matter how zen I am. As soon as I get with my immediate family, they just fucking drive me loopy. And part of me wants to react in the old way, right? That old dynamic. And I get my back up and I've got to start defending myself. And then yesterday I did that, right? And then I was like, well, hold on a second. Is this really how I want to end this, the same way it always ends? And I said, no, I don't want to end it like this. Someone has to be the adult, right? I said, all right, Ron, step up, be the adult. Don't get caught up in your story, mate. And then it just resolved, right? We were able to like really diffuse the situation and just have a good conversation. And it was like, I'm telling you, man, a real honest conversation takes less energy and less power than when you're trying to just be right all the time and make other people wrong. What do you reckon about that, Ben?
Yeah, 100%. Because ultimately, your reaction to anything is the only thing you've got any charge over. Like, it's the only thing you can ever expect from any conversation, from any interaction, from any position you are in life, because everybody's operating from an individual. You don't know what got them to where they are today. You don't know what got to their beliefs to where they are. You can live beside someone every day and they can be the closest thing in your world, and you'll never really know their experience because you didn't grow up in their environment. You can maybe intellectually know all the details about their life, but never having lived it, you will never actually know. So the only thing you have any ability to change is yourself. And so the easiest thing to do is, and this is why we talk about doing the work and going into releasing these old memories and these habitual patterns and these things that have informed you to this point of where you are now and why you operate the way you operate, good or bad, it is irrelevant. It's okay, with the awareness that you have today, now what do you do from now on? How are you going to approach this situation? How are you going to operate from here? And you will find that once you start to do that, there's kind of like almost the universe's acknowledgement of you're doing the work, that the drama tends to not even come into your sphere as much. Like, because again, we're manifesting beings, we're creating reality in every moment. If you start to reorient your perception of reality and where you're coming from, those things just less come into your field, and they may not, and that's okay as well. But your relationship to those things changes. And so once you start to embody that change as a new experience, in my experience, it less comes in, or you identify it really quickly and shift it really quickly, or just go, I'm not really here for that. That's not the kind of interactions I want to have anymore. So you're quick to shut it down, or to clean it up or fix it up, or whatever. But yeah, those types of interactions become less of an occurrence in my experience. You know, do you feel that?
Yeah, 100%. Look, you know what I would add to that is, this is from my experience having like all these interactions and dealing with people. The way I react to a situation, probably more times than not, is going to affect how the other people are going to react in that same situation. If I come from a place where I like start getting defensive, I need to protect my story and make sure that I'm right, they're probably going to be doing the same thing. So what happens when I change that mindset and go, okay, you know what, I'm going to just come from a place of love, and I'm not going to get caught up, and I'm just going to acknowledge that my shit's going to come up, and the worst case scenario is I'm probably going to fucking get angry and have a go. I can acknowledge that's a possibility, but it's not the intention. My intention is just to be in a place of love, be an adult, and just speak from that place. And I noticed a shift that occurred for me because I was just reacting for the first few minutes, and I noticed how their reaction all of a sudden amped up to meet my reaction. And I could see that, right? And I mean, it's not easy seeing these things, right? It takes time, it takes practice. And then when I could see where this was going, which was going to be the same old story, I actually just pulled back and went quiet. And I just walked away for a sec, and I just realigned myself, and I came back and I asked a different set of questions. Instead of always, by asking questions, something different, it changed the dynamic and the energy. And I'm not going to get into the details of what happened, right? It doesn't matter. But the point is, I changed the dynamic. And because I changed that dynamic within myself. And that's what you're saying, Ben. It's change begins with you, right? Change begins with what you're willing to do. To change the world, you need to change yourself. And we spend so much time looking for the outside world to give us meaning, to fill the void, when really it's already inside. And that's all we need to do, is actually look inside. And you'll see that all the answers are there. Maybe not instantly, because you're a bit muddled and confused and you've got to get through the murky waters and whatever, but everything's there. You just got to be willing to swim through that shit to begin with until you get to the other side. And the more times you swim through it, the less it gets shittier, and as it starts to get pretty clean. And the cleaner it starts to become, the more grounded and anchored you are in your own body. So when someone starts to throw shit at you, you go, well, I can dodge this. I know how to deal with this, right? Because I've swam through it. And this is what we're talking about, profound responsibility, right? It sort of comes back to that. And this is what we talk about, doing the work, right? And having the courage, having the will, having the imagination, to have the awareness to say, you know what, this is what I do, this is how I am. It's not right, wrong, good or bad. It just is. And that's all there is to it, right? We give it labels, we give ourselves labels, and we put expectations, we make ourselves wrong and all this sort of shit. And like you were saying, Ben, family, parents, they just grew up what they grew up with, right?
Everybody you meet is going through something you have no idea about. So
no idea.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to navigate themselves in their world.
Yeah.
Right? They're in their own ship, in their own waters, trying to navigate, looking at their stars, looking at their beliefs, their patterns, their orientation, just like we are.
And that's why that's why there's no one size fits all. It's not, you know, everybody has their own path to healing, and what that looks like, and there's many different ways, you know, all roads lead home, you know, because I think there's multiple angles that it can be taken from, and some will suit you better than others, you know, but this is why we do the work, you know, and there's little things you can do every day, like meditate or journal, or just get clear, you know, go have sessions on a regular, because it takes away the backlog, you know, the things that have informed you to get to the place you are today and where you're operating from. Like the more you clean out the backlog, the more you can be in those scenarios and it not be an issue, or you don't get triggered, or you don't create triggers unnecessarily, and you start to have these easier interactions with the understanding that we're all just human, we're all just doing our best. And some maybe put more effort into that than others, but you know, how you choose to have anybody in your world is up to you. And yeah, our suggestion is why we do the work is because it's coming from that place of, yeah, I don't want to get into these dramas and these things, and I want to have a more enriching experience with my fellow humans. Yeah, experience.
Yeah, man, I just want to love myself and want to love people, right? That's it. You want to love yourself and love people. You want to connect to yourself and you want to connect to people. You want to connect to the world. You know, we spend so much time distracted and out of our own selves, caught up in, you know, whether it's our phones or it's TV or it's something, whatever. We're always distracted by something, you know, and it's easier to be distracted than deal with your own stuff. It's that simple, right? And, you know, we're advocates, we're believers, you know, there's nothing like when you step into yourself, the power that you have. Nothing like it, man.
Experiences. We're not even believers, we're experiences, you know, because we've had the experience. There's nothing to believe at that point. It's an experience, it's embodied experience. So yeah, it's beyond belief. It's like, no, it's our reality.
Yeah. And this, I'm glad you said that, right? Because, you know, I'll kind of want to leave people with this thought today, that your beliefs create your reality. And then that will reinforce your beliefs. So if you believe that you're this or something, or whatever it may be that you believe, whether it's a good thing or bad thing, but you really believe it, that's going to create the reality that you're going to live. And then you living that reality is going to keep reinforcing that same belief. Now that's a loop or a vicious circle, whatever you want to call it, right? And for some of us, we can't even see it because it's happening in the background. We can't see it, right? It's like someone who always changes jobs because the people wherever they work are always either pains in the ass, or they don't get along with maybe 2 or 3 of those people. No one listens to what they have to say. And then they go to another job and it's good, but then all of a sudden all that stuff happens again. All these band-aid solutions, thinking you're changing the symptom is going to change the structure. This is where our beliefs create a reality and reinforce that in the background, because we're not even aware of what's happening. So this is where awareness comes into it. And when you can start to see how your beliefs create your reality, and that's the ship you're navigating, and then you wonder why you keep running into like shallow waters, or you keep, you know, smashing the bow onto like rocks because you can't see, because you don't know. This is where we talk about, this is an opportunity to step up into your power as an individual. But it all starts with you. It's that simple. It all starts with you.
As much as negative perpetuating loops can be present, so can positive ones. You know, so if you do the work, put the structures in place for you to create them, they can be that bubble that you live in, where you see the positive in every scenario, and it's not going into the doom and gloom of what maybe used to be, and it's now, what is the opportunity within this scenario? What is the positive here? Or just perpetually having more of those positive experiences without the negative ones being as present. So yeah, this is...
Yeah, fuck yeah. I have a model for that one too, Ben, if I can share it.
Sure.
So I call that the success model, right? The orientation, where you learn something and you apply it. And then that application actually gives you success because you've applied what you've learned. And then that encourages you to learn more, wanting to apply more. And it's that cycle. It doesn't, you can have a positive, negative cycle. Yeah, it doesn't matter. The power is when you actually, like, if you're in a conscious, aware state of what you're creating and you're living that and you're taking the steps, you're going to be in a better place for sure. And I mean, that takes will. It takes courage. It takes discipline. More times than not. And this is what we talked about, you know, this 80%, 20% rule, you know. There's a lot of different ways you can go, but the thoughts that we create, this is how I like to see it, right? You're always creating, doesn't matter, right? We are constantly creating. You're either creating what you love or what you don't love at the end of the day. It's just the question is, who is creating what? Are you creating from a place of love, or are you creating from a place of your thoughts and your feelings and your mindset and your ego?
Where's your attention? You know,
yeah, where's your intention?
Attention as well. Like, are you just looking at the negative? Yeah, because if you're just looking at the negative, that's what you're going to see way more, more of. You know, so if it's yes, your intention, but your attention as well. What do you give your attention to? So,
yeah, 100%.
Well, that's what it is to be human. What does it mean to be human? And it looks like another week for us, and we might leave you with that. So I know Ron's got to run, and good luck out there, and we'll see you in another week. And feel free to drop any questions, messages in the comments, and we'll get back to you at some point. Any closing words, mate?
No, you said it, mate. Everyone stay safe, stay in your hearts, and just love your lives and love yourselves. See you guys next week.
Take care.